everybody, and welcome back to the Ultimate Fashion History for a little special. This time we're going out of orbit to look at fashion and outer space, and this one is dedicated to all of the Ultimate Fashion History Facebook group members who are as delighted with Alessandro Michele's collection for Gucci Fall 2017. It really brought us all back to a time when fashion was fun before it took itself all too seriously. So I thought I'd use this as a little excuse to discuss the history of outer space as a fashion influence, but to also focus on why space is such a big fashion story in 2017 when we saw the wonderful Gucci collection and its astounding promotion. I'm sure I wasn't the only one who thought, hang on, there's a bit of a pattern here in 2017. I suppose it blasted off, excuse the pun, with Chanel's spectacular show with the almost life-sized rocket ship and the collection of silvery space-aged ensembles with those lunar thermal shawls and, of course, the astronaut prints. And now we have Gucci with this delightful melange of outer space and science fiction that draws on everything from Star Trek to cheesy B sci-fi movies of the 1950s with these wonderful alien landscapes. It also draws on Avatar, at least in the promotion. And what else? A couple of months ago, we have Gigi Hadid on the cover of Harper's wearing Chanel. But come on, take it all together, and space is in the air, isn't it? Fashion is not an island, it's a response. And so at the end of the video, I'm going to try to theorize a little bit on why we are currently so obsessed with space in fashion. Culturally, we first fell in love with outer space, of course, in the 1950s. I always think that the space race was the fun side of the Cold War. It was a cultural obsession, and quite rightly, it was an astonishing thing to do, to send rockets into outer space, men into outer space, and satellites into outer space. The first satellite, of course, was Sputnik. The Russians sent Sputnik up, but even though we were not best friends with Russia in the 1950s, we loved Sputnik to such an extent that, look, you could even buy a Sputnik burger. We were hot on the heels with Telstar, our first satellite, which of course inspired the hit song Telstar by the Tornadoes, which, fun fact, was the first #1 in America from a British band. This obsession with space impacted everything from Googie architecture and all of these wonderful motels and restaurants with names like the Space Age Lodge or the Starburst Motel and stuff like that. I love this era. And of course, in the early 1960s, this is when we saw the Space Needles shooting up all over the landscape of the world. We sent a chimp into outer space. There he is, looking a little bit nervous, but he lived to tell the tale. The Soviet Unions, as you all remember, were the first people to successfully send a man into outer space. This man, a very brave man, and he lived to tell the tale too. Yuri Gagarin survived and was given an awful lot of medals. And of course, this is the era when people were convinced they were seeing flying saucers. And I happen to believe that they were. I am a Roswell believer. Space was everywhere. In advertising. Take a look at these two ads. Puffin biscuits, so light they almost fly, with that kid in his space helmet. And Campari in tall drinks or short, mixed or straight. Italy's most fashionable aperitif. It's just out of this world. Any excuse was given to throw outer space into your copy to sell your product. I love this. Farah of Texas schoolwear. Out of this world style with down-to-earth prices. And look at these two kids doing the twist on a planet somewhere. Kellogg's Pep, the solar cereal. Kellogg's Cornflakes offers you your chance to be a space cadet. Every kid wanted to be a space cadet. I'm not really sure what a space cadet was. I think it was sort of like the Boy Scouts of the solar system. All very exciting. Any toy with an outer space connection did very well. Messenger from Mars. Robots. Every kid had to have a toy robot and a ray gun. And check this out, Spaco, a new space game for boys and girls. Cinema as well, movies. Of course, all of those wonderful 1950s sci-fi movies. Invaders from Mars, It Came from Outer Space. And then in the early 1960s, of course, on television with shows like The Jetsons. Space was everywhere. On greeting cards, on pin-up girls. Take a look at these two. You can just imagine some guy having a lovely daydream of being an astronaut and landing on a planet and finding these lovely gals. And of course, no Halloween in the 50s was complete without an alien knocking at your door, one of the little green men. Don't they look adorable? I would be terrified if I opened my door to these two here. Every family had a kid who wanted to be an astronaut. I wonder who the kid was in this family. I think that's one of my favorite images that I use in class. I love it. It speaks so much to that era, especially that atomic age design on the curtains behind them. But one area that the space obsession didn't seem to impact in the 1950s and early 60s was fashion. Apart from a few rocket ship motifs or planetary motifs on aloha shirts or children's pajamas, it didn't impact fashion. And I find that very interesting because fashion is not an island, it's a response. Why wasn't fashion responding in the 50s to the cultural obsession for space? My theory as to why fashion didn't leap on the space craze in the 1950s is that it was so tied in with the refeminization of women and the new look that it just didn't lend itself at all to space, although I can figure out ways that it could have. No, we would have to wait until the mid-1960s to see the obsession with space really take hold in terms of fashion. Now, this was the second phase of the space age. This is when there was that little rocket fuel boost, not to put a man into space, but to put a man on the moon. And boy, oh boy, did we see space as a big fashion influence. But it took the youthquake to do it. This was stuff for younger people. And there were certain designers who absolutely cornered the market on the space craze. Pierre Cardin, Courrèges, of course, Paco Rabanne with these wonderful metallic kind of chainmail dresses. And there's Françoise Hardy wearing Paco Rabanne. And if you want to learn more about Françoise Hardy, check her out in the Ultimate Fashion History 20th Century Style Icon episode on the Yeah Yeah Girls. The most extreme mid-1960s space-inspired fashion is, of course, in the satirical movie Qui êtes-vous, Polly Magoo, with these incredible metallic outfits designed by Janine Klein. But these are joke outfits, guys. This was a parody. And the model on the left, of course, is Doña Luna, very appropriately named for this episode of UFH. But even though all of this stuff was really extreme, the space craze in the mid-1960s really did impact real-life retail and people on the streets. It was an era that was in love with plastic and PVC and PU, and it all tied in together with space and this sort of man-made artifice that I discuss in another video. I use Nancy Sinatra as the object through which to discuss all of this, so I don't want to get into it too much here because I don't want to double dip from myself. 1968's Barbarella notwithstanding, by the time we get to the late 60s, fashion had really moved away from that space age mid-60s look, and it was all about nostalgia and romance, and this continued into the 70s with the gypsy look and the peasant look, or indeed the pantsuit. However, there was one little group in the early 1970s who kept soaring out of orbit. The Glam Rockers. The glam rock style really did draw a lot from 1950s sci-fi movies. Here's David Bowie, of course. On the right is Sweet, and here is my personal friend. Well, I interviewed her once, the incredible Susie Quattro. A lot of space cadet type of jumpsuits in metallics with glitter and this kind of thing. But space wasn't a big fashion look or trend in the 1970s. In the 1980s, there were little moments of space. In fact, Designer Thierry Mugler was the space cadet when it came to 1980s fashion, but over the past 20 years or so, we haven't really seen all that much space influence on the runway or indeed on the street. I mean, we can always count on Lady Gaga to give us a little bit of space age glamour. A few years ago, Christopher Kane's Interstellar Prince was certainly very popular and beloved. And here is Versace last year. Now, I have been saying for about the past 4 years that space is coming back. When I was a trend forecaster, my problem was that I always got the trends right. My forecasts were always spot on, but I always predicted them happening far sooner than they did. But now I feel vindicated because in 2017, there is a true and genuine fashion trend for space. I got it right. Just got it 3 years out. But everything from Alessandro Michele for Gucci to these really cute NASA bags by Coach. Space is everywhere, but the question is why? Why space? Why now? Well, fashion is not an island, it's a response. And maybe our interest in outer space and other planets is because of the state of our own. We haven't been very kind to our own planet, have we? Concerns for the environment are getting very real. The ice caps are melting, which of course is putting our wildlife in danger. Look at this starving polar bear here. Oh, that really breaks my heart. At home here in America, well, it certainly is an era of division and tension, isn't it? But on a more global level, we've got this nutjob running around with his threat of nuclear war. These are sort of scary times in a way, aren't they? Stephen Hawking certainly thinks so. He recently said that we have 200 years to evacuate Earth. Wow, that's cheerful. So I think that maybe on some subconscious level, it's really been in our cultural psyche that we might have to actually find that planet in the Goldilocks zone, as they call it, a planet that's not too cold and not too hot and can actually support human life. I mean, a couple of years ago, do you remember when NASA started advertising for applications for people to colonize Mars, and it was flooded with applications? And there are architectural companies at the moment vying over who gets to build the first habitable moon bases. So this stuff is all kind of happening at the moment, isn't it? Think about movies that have come along over the past 2 or 3 years. Life, The Space Between Us, Interstellar, The Martian, Passengers, Arrival, and even Alien Covenant that came around this year. All of these movies really speak to this idea of deep space exploration and colonization. And fashion is a response. I think fashion has responded to this interest, this very real interest that maybe one day soon we might have to colonize outer space, but it didn't respond sensibly. It didn't, for example, meet with scientists to discuss new textiles that could work on Mars. No, it responded in a very silly way. But that's okay because sometimes fashion responds as a distraction, as a sweetener. It lightens things up, and there's nothing wrong with that. I personally think the idea of colonizing other planets is really exciting, but I hope that we do it through choice, not through necessity, because our own planet is so lovely. But when we do colonize that utopian far-off planet, how will we dress? Well, here's my idea. I think the first settlers should go with nothing but fig leaves. Let's start fashion history from scratch all over again, and hopefully this time we can avoid what I perceive as some of fashion history's biggest mistakes, like the 1830s. On our far-off planet, let's get fashion history right this time so that I never have to make an ultimate fashion history rant. Mars edition. All right, I'm splashing down. I hope you've enjoyed this episode on the Ultimate Fashion History. You can contact me through my website, amandahalley.com. Like us on Facebook, as they say. Better yet, join our Facebook group. We always have loads of fun over there. Stay up to date with new episodes. Simply click the little bell under the channel art, then click Send Me Notifications, because I'm back every week with new episodes, but first, you have to click that little circle to subscribe. And as always, thanks ever so much for watching. Bye for now.